Hello everyone. So in our previous video we kinda just set up entire sim the entire faction, but we never actually really added any of the GUIs, and there's one last simulation that we need to add as well. Um and that one is going to be faction traits major. So remember how in my previous video I was talking, well, the last video I just did, how I was talking about faction affinity and those are the traits that can't be switched out. There's actually is another, um, well, this is somewhat similar, but this one deals more with the faction traits in general. And you'll see what I'm talking about when we go into this. So if you take a look at this, these are all the traits that are dealing with the technology, and sometimes they're also dealing with the units as well. Like as you can see right here. So anything that I think deals with the any type of faction trait that you want to add, you would add it here. And it's just more as in like these just give the these are just similar to like the major faction custom traits, except it's like another way of organizing it. It's just that like now your faction has it as well. So if you don't have this, it'll still work. But if you add to this, it'll just make it like a bit more organized. So what we're going to do is that we are going to do what we normally do. We're going to just cut all of this except for the ones at the top, just as an example. Actually, I'm going to leave that right there. I'm gonna cut everything but the Broken Lord. And as you can see, we also have the main quest right there. We're going to cut that, and then we're going to cut all of this right here because we don't need anything with the global, because we're just mostly dealing with our faction itself. So right here we have two examples. This one, well, actually I probably should have kept in one of the actual what's it called? I should have kept in one of the units that they have, but right here you can add in the subcategory, like as in this is an affinity trait, and then give it a cost. And then you also add in the heat wave, and the reason why I have this here is that it's just like another way of organizing it. But for right now, in my Kazanji faction that I did, I actually, if we were to take a look at it, I actually didn't have any of the real definitions there. The only two things I have is just the units and the heat wave. And since my Kazanji faction also worked, we're just gonna, and to save time here, we're just going to leave it as is. So we're just only going to have our heat wave, and we're also going to have our our units there when we get to it. So for right here, we're going to change this to be the faction trait SF heat wave. And yeah, this is just saying that we're allowing to have this heat wave, and it's just going to only happen during like the heat wave time. Another way of just organizing this. The only thing I'm just not entirely sure about, which we can also test later on, is that if without this, would we still be able to have our heat wave trait during the heat wave in our faction without adding anything? I'm pretty sure the answer is yes, but like there is still like a 1% chance that like I could be wrong. But yeah, whenever you're dealing with heat waves or any faction traits that you don't really want to switch out, I guess this is where you would add them. But this is mostly just for heat waves and units. But yeah, you can also actually, I'm going to also add in my faction trait from the faction affinity right here, the one that the SF specific trait right here. And I'm going to add that one in as more of an example. Well, as you can see right here, they have like several simulation descriptions, like references, and they combine that into one broken Lord simulation description. But what we're going to do is that we're going to just cut that out and leave that right here. We're going to change this cost from, actually we'll just leave it as 10 for now. It doesn't really make a difference. And we're going to change this from that to, we're gonna call this SF specific trait. So yeah, so this probably didn't like really change anything except for the fact that like we now have the subcategory affinity trait and the cost right here for when we're working on like the whole like custom factions type of thing. But yeah, other than that, our game should functionally work, and we saw in our last video that it did work. But like when we were able to load it up, it did actually work. The only thing we haven't done yet was actually play test it. Really, I mean, we just started, but we never actually played as the civil as a major faction. But later on in the video, I can, like, at the end of the video, I typically go and play test it. So we will play test this later on in the end of the video. But as for now, we can close out all of our traits right here because we are not going to work in the simulation anymore. We now have our GUI to work on. And just to make sure that we don't get any sort of validation error because of any problems, what we could just do right now is quickly click on all of these and check the Internet Explorer and make sure that they are working. So if anyone that appears to have like that appear blank or have any sort of like weird scripting problems in here, basically it just won't pop up in the Internet Explorer, and it's a really good way to determine if you have a syntax error or not. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will solve any logical errors, such as you wanted to have like plus 10 dust instead of plus 10 industry on like a specific tile. This will only just work to see like does it like syntaxically work, like if you go from top to bottom. So yeah, now we're going into GUI, and the next thing that we're going to have is that we're going to add in. We gotta make sure that like we're gonna add in our faction, give it like a name and all that other stuff. So in order to make sure I'm not missing any GUIs, I'm going to just use my Kazanji faction GUI as a little bit of an example. So right here, what we need is the GUI elements affinity. So I'm just going to copy that right there, and I'm just gonna paste that right there. And it's when you open with a lot of times on like a different thing, it will typically mess up a little bit like that. So right here we can change our GUI element like of what our affinity name is going to be, and change that to affinity SF. Another thing that we could do, I showed this in my Autotopian showcase mod video, but this is something I kind of learned new from that mod, is that when you want to change the title, what you could do is that you can actually type in the title right here, and that technically could work. So I could just type in Silica faction, and it will work. However, the only thing is that when you work with bigger mods, you want to have all your like titles and descriptions in one folder, really, so it's a lot easier to go back and forth and change the titles. And also there's some descriptions that you need to have that's only available in the localization. For example, if you want to change whenever you start your army, if you were to play as a cultist, you'll have something that'll say, you'll have an ending that'll say like first hand of the queen, and then it'll say like first elbow of the queen or something like that, or first something of the queen. And the of the queen part, that's only in the localization. So having all your localization traits in one distinct folder and area is very useful when you're working on big mods. But working on smaller mods, where specifically more as in like where you're only working on 4 traits or 5 traits, that is useful. You can just do it as the GUI elements right here if you want. But for right now, I'm going to just Control Z, and I'm just going to have this be a reference to our localization, which we will change towards the end of this series. And so we're going to change our function to SF title, which doesn't exist, so we're only going to get this right now. And then our function to SF description, faction to FS description, which we don't have the FS description yet, but we will change later on. So it's just going to spurt this out right here. So now we have our affinity. Affinity mapping we don't do anything with because we are not changing the actual images of the mod of our faction yet. Later, like towards the end, as a bonus, I will show you how to do this. But the only reason why I'm saying as a bonus is because if you work on this, there are drawbacks to it as well that I don't know how to mitigate or like how to actually fix. And I will show you what these drawbacks are and all that other stuff. The faction integration. This is the this is just like I think the whole like what style of city you're having. I think I described that last video. And then we have our faction. Our faction. This one is our faction right here. This is another one that's similar to just affinity. It's just something that's gonna pop up when your faction loads. Except that like both of them pop up in different areas. So just keep that in mind. So we are going to change the faction to SF title, and we're going to change this to SF description. And I guess if you guys want, because it's not good only just to show my Kazanji faction, I'm going to show you this also in the Endless Legend public GUI. So if we look in the affinities, you can see that these are just examples where they have it, the affinity roving clans, faction, roving clans title, and then roving clans description. And then they do that for all of these as well. And that's just for the affinities an example. We also have our faction, GUI element faction, which should be right there. And then we have our Broken Lords title, Rage Wizards title, all the other titles again. These are just, again, these are like the same thing. The affinities and the factions are, I'm not entirely sure why I have a good feeling of why they're different. Like why you have like two different files, why you have a GUI elements faction tile file, and why you have a GUI elements affinity title. And I'm pretty sure that the reason is because since you have two different things, you have one that's a faction, one that's an affinity, you're going to need to have two different GUI elements. That way they both correlate to different. So that way they both like have a correlation. It's just that the wording on them is going to be the same. I hope that makes sense. But yeah. Anyways, so our next thing that we are going to add in is actually taking a look at it. I think that is it. Yeah, that should be all that we need for our GUI. And so right now I am going to load up Endless Legend. There's only one last thing that I just need to take a look at, and this is really loud. I'm going to just lower the volume on that a little bit. And I can't find where this was, but there's a I'll show you where it is in the game right here. But there's another little thing that you can also edit as well, where in the, I think it's in the public simulation, in the what's it called, simulation description faction affinity. Oh wow, this is really loud. Okay, I gotta even lower that bit more. Alright, so we're gonna go to our mod. We have our Silix faction up, and we're going to validate that. So if we go into new game and we click on a faction, we can see our faction right here. The only thing that we still need to is the affinity fixture SF victory type. Um, and I think that one is, I'm not entirely sure which one of these it is. Um, but we can find that out after all of this. So as you can see, we have a SF description, the SF title, we have our name, the author, um, and yeah, uh, I'm gonna actually just go back real quick into the public and look in the GUI real quick and see, um, just look at the affinity. I think it should be here. Uh, Maybe not there, but there's definitely going to be a spot. Oh wait, no, it shouldn't be in this one. That's a completely different thing. It should then be maybe in our faction, that whole victory thing. I'm not entirely sure where that one is. But yeah, anyways, we'll just start our faction. Oh, and if you were to look at the ad, we have 90 out of 10, and we have plus 10 for our one trait right here, the one that we called as 10, and we can't switch this out. We're going to call this, I guess, W for now, and we have our traits right here. I'm just going to validate this as just a custom faction, but I'm going to play as this guy right here because I want to play as our actual faction. And yeah. Oh, and in the end, when you change the infinity mapping, this is known as the mood score, and you can change this. You can change this technically to any image that's inside Endless Legend already, but you can't add your own. I've tried many times to get this to work. Um, but yeah, it's a little problem in the modding. Anyways, while that is loading, I'm going to take a look in my Kazanji faction, and I think it should be in here. Actually, maybe it's not there. It could be in this other one. I'm going to just open up a new file. I'm going to go into my Steam, look for my Steam apps workshop content. I'm gonna look for this one, and I think, no, that's something else. Oh well, game's starting anyways. So yeah, we start out with our units, which are going to be the what's it called, Broken Lords, and we have the Broken Lord settlers and units. Even though our image is of the Mad Fairies, we start out with these guys because we we called them in our tutorial. So we're gonna start right. So I'm gonna just start right there, and we're going to take a look at our entire empire right here. So yeah, right now we have our entire empire up and running. The only thing that we're just kind of missing is just the actual localization of it, which are the descriptions of all of these. But this is our empire, and if we want, we could change this to something like the Mycara, or like change this to anything we really want. And later on, I can show you how to, and like when we work on the mapping, I can show you how to even change that image. So if you want to have Thanos, or if you want to have Steve Jobs, you can change it to that image as well. And yeah, so that's going to be the end of this mod video. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time just looking for this last thing real quick that I was just talking about earlier. And that's not what I'm looking for. This isn't what I'm looking for. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. Okay. And this should be my faction. So if I go into the GUI right here and I look at the faction, that's going to be normal. How do we change that whole thing? You know what? I think I'm just going to end the video off for now, and when I find it later, I will show you guys how to work with that. But there is definitely a way of how you actually say what type of victory is best for your character. It may be in affinity mapping. No, I don't think that that's there. Um, could be right there. No, not that. Um, yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Like I got it before, but for some reason I just can't find it right now. Uh, well, anyways, guys, I'll look for that in my next video. And in my next video, we are going to go over how to make units. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe. And I will see you in my next video.